Welcome to the driver ratings of the Hungarian Grand Prix. A new race winner, Oscar Piastri, OP81, makes it race win number one. He's won a sprint race before. It was a tense race. It wasn't by all means a classic, was it? But there was enough in that race. And this is why I love the two-stop strategy races. There's a mix of strategy. We've seen overtakes. Because of that, the undercut was working strong. And so there was always something going on. Battles, guys coming through the back. Perez and Russell did great jobs. And we see Max Verstappen in a battle, didn't we? All the way through. And it was tight and tense up the front. Team orders was the name of the day. And yeah, let's jump straight into it. Number one, Oscar Piastri, another new race winner. 7 different race winners this season, and who'd have thought that after Max Verstappen was wiping the floor with everybody early doors? Where's the pace gone in that Red Bull? I mean, it just seems to have gone downhill for them since Adrian Newey said he's going to resign. I'm sure it's nothing to do with that, in fact, but the upgrades, the big upgrades of Max's car didn't work, and Oscar took full advantage for McLaren. I didn't have them having a strong weekend here, but Oscar was brilliant. He did the job, just missed out on pole position in qualifying, was next to nothing behind his teammate, and did the job right at the front on the first lap and controlled the race. I mean, what I really like about this guy is even when he won the race, he was just so calm and collected over the radio, isn't it? There's no ranting and raving, or even when, you know, Norris wasn't really giving that position back to him, he wasn't really like sort of kicking and screaming over the radio to the team, or not that we heard anyway. And it's so nice to hear someone like that. And he drove a brilliant race. He controlled it from the front. Managed the gap to Lando Norris. His only mistake, which probably put him in a bit of a pickle with the whole Norris scenario, was when he ran wide at turn 11. We lost what had a 4-second gap on Lando Norris. Lost 2 seconds of that, or 2.5 seconds of that, by the time he recollected himself, and that meant when Norris, or if Norris was to do the undercut, he didn't have the luxury of going 1 lap longer and coming out ahead of him. The team decided to cover off Norris with Hamilton with Norris. He was actually with a real threat. 2 or 3 more laps and Hamilton potentially could have passed Norris. And we've seen how well he held off Max Verstappen. It's difficult to overtake if you use your car wisely down straight into turn 1. It's the only place you can overtake around Hungary. And if you can block that bit, you're in for a win, aren't you? So Piastri was unlucky that Norris got ahead. The only down part of it, I think that he'll be disappointed is that he made hard work catching up to Lando Norris. Lando Norris was an absolute flyer from there. But before that point, Piastri had Norris covered. So I think he'll be disappointed with himself, or a bit scratching his head a bit why he didn't have the pace in the second half or the last third of the race there. But other than that, he controlled it brilliant for a first win, backs up his sprint win. And this guy is, shown why he's the real deal. A race win in the sprint, and McLaren will be so happy with what he's done. He can be massively proud. A 10 out of 10 for me, because it was a fantastic race. Second place, Lando Norris. A brilliant pole lap. Got it all together, and in the race, he got a really horrible start, didn't he? Compromised, tried to push Piastri out, but didn't have nowhere to go. He was his teammate, and then really was in no man's a little bit with Max Verstappen around the outside. Did well to avoid any collisions. Passed by Verstappen. Luckily for him, the stewards were going to penalise Verstappen, and that meant he had to give Norris the place back. And then wasn't really in the race, was he, until the call came to, pit early to cover off Lewis Hamilton. But then from there on, he was absolutely flying. I think the only disappointing from his side is that the strategy, the way it worked out, he couldn't really have that battle with Oscar to say to the team, look, or battle it out for the race win with Oscar, because I'm sure he would have taken the win. And it must be a kick in the teeth, because this is another one where he should have really picked up 25 points and he hasn't. And had he done so in the 3 or 4 occasions, we'd all be talking about Lando Norris taking the fight to his friend Max Verstappen for the championship. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, but if they continue on this route the way they have done, if McLaren go for that number 1 driver and stick the eggs in the basket with Norris, could they really mount a title challenge? Who knows? But they didn't make that decision to do and put him in that position today, did they? So he'll be disappointed with that. But overall, I think he can be really happy with the weekend. A 1-2 for McLaren. I'm also going to give him a 10 out of 10 because I think his overall weekend was actually really good. Apart from poor start, he was pretty spot on. His second stint was absolutely brilliant. Third place, Lewis Hamilton, and wow, P5, that car didn't look like it was going anywhere quick, but as soon as he booted on the hard tyres, which he said weren't great, he was pumping in fastest laps, wasn't he? He was way on. It's just that they didn't make them tyres last at all, whether they were dropping off. But I thought he pulled off a brilliant last stint again on the hard. 30 laps on that hard tyre. We were seeing guys doing 24, 25, and they were just dropping off an edge, weren't they? So to keep that and control it, held off Max Verstappen really well. It was a deep lunge which Max messed up, which ultimately meant he cemented that place. Interesting that Max didn't get a penalty for that in the end, but I'll talk about that when I talk about Max Verstappen. But yeah, luckily Hamilton didn't get any damage from there and brought home a podium position, his 200th podium position. The guy is just an absolute machine. I thought it was a really good weekend, really good recovery from P5 to podium. I had him tipped for big things this weekend, but it wasn't quite there for them. In the hot conditions, the car isn't as fast as the McLaren or Red Bull just yet, but when the conditions cooler, like we've seen in Q1 in qualifying, that car is mega quick, and they'll be hoping for more wet, cool conditions, and Spa can throw that up next time for him. But a 10 out of 10 for me because I thought he was absolutely really brilliant. Fourth place, Charles Leclerc, and from sixth place, that is probably the best that they could hope for, to beat a Red Bull and a Mercedes. I don't think they were that quick. There was part of the races where they were really fast. He did really well, and the strategy call from Ferrari to actually undercut Max Verstappen was really, really good. But he got passed by Max in the end. Luckily for him, he got past Verstappen to that fifth place when he made that mistake, and that's all he can do, put himself in the positions when it counts. And he was actually really good from there, wasn't it? A poor qualifying overall, I'd say, but even then I think Carlos Sainz did a really good job to put himself where he did in qualifying. But Charles Leclerc did it when it counted, got the pass on his teammate at the start, and that meant he got the strategy advantage and he made it count. Yeah, I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10 because I thought he was actually really good. Fifth place for Max Verstappen, and this was probably one of his worst weekends, I think. He was unlucky that he got told to give that place back to Norris at the start, and I think that was the start of the whole losing his head a little bit, wasn't he? Because when you look back at it, I think it was harsh, because where could Max go, to be honest with you? If he turned in, he would hit Norris. Norris had nowhere to go because he had Piastri on the inside, and what were they expecting him to just lean off and give it to Norris? You don't do that on the first lap on a first corner, especially here in Budapest where the start is crucial. And so I did think it was a little bit harsh that he had to give the place back. And then from there on, it was strange because he was there or thereabouts with the McLaren, wasn't it? And I think their eyes were looking forward rather than looking back. And then Lewis Hamilton got the undercut, which I thought was a brilliant strategy from them. And then he just lost it a little bit, didn't he? He was so infuriated with that. He got the pass at the end of the first stint on Lewis Hamilton, but uncharacteristically ran wide at turn 2. And then the lunge, which he's actually got away with. Surprisingly, I think, actually, because he was the one that went for the lunge. He was out of control. He locked both wheels. Could Hamilton, what were they expecting him to stop and not let him slide past and then take the turn so to avoid the hit? But you've got to turn at some point. I can see where the stewards did say I think Hamilton could have done more potentially to avoid it, to just keep his wheels straight slightly. But Max was the one that made the lunge, was out of control, and if you're the one out of control making that lunge and you hit, then it's really your fault. So stewards again throwing a decision here that is just absolutely nowhere, in my opinion. It adds another one to where you'll say, where's the consistency? I think a penalty should have really come, but it wasn't to be. But But if they're going to do that, then just be consistent. I think that's all we ask as race fans. And probably one of his worst races, Max Verstappen. Did the lack of sleep help or not help this weekend? It clearly didn't, I don't think, because he was busy doing his sim racing after late last night and in the morning before the race, and the car isn't where it was, where I think he needs that maximum sort of attention and all the small details to be a Formula 1 driver. Maybe Red Bull might tell him, like, just taper it out on race weekends. But who's going to say that to a multiple world champion now? And Max is the star man, isn't he? But a 5 out of 10 weekend for me. I thought he was disappointing. 6th place, Carlos Sainz. He got a really poor start after a really good qualifying position, didn't he? Dropped back even behind Fernando Alonso. Actually made that move back on him, and then from there onwards he was in a little bit of no man's land, wasn't he? He wasn't really fast enough to keep up and catch Lewis Hamilton or Charles Leclerc, and then just finished where he did. He closed up on Max Verstappen at the end. Thought he might have enough to pass Max, which was interesting because Max would have had some serious damage, I'm sure. The way he slammed into that car, into the ground. I thought Max was vulnerable to Carlos Sainz, but it didn't. He managed to bridge that gap. It was about 2 seconds in the end behind Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz. So the poor start really did cost him, but overall I think it was a decent weekend. Brought home some good points. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Sergio Perez in P7 from P16. I think that's a really good recovery drive from him. Much needed confidence booster. He was steady recovery in the first stages of the race, and then came out P15 after his first stop. Was up to P11 in no time, and at that race he thought he was really in a fight for probably 5th and 6th because he was flying on them hard tyres. But from there on, dropped a little bit. He'd be happy he beat George Russell, who he lined up alongside, and I think I did say that's his target, to beat that guy. He achieved that in the end. Overall, he just needs to get a good weekend together, isn't it? They're all raving about how good his Friday was. He threw it away on Saturday like he did in Silverstone, but a good recovery this time. Probably the best he could have hoped for. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10 because overall I think he did a good job in race day. 8th place for George Russell, and another one who had a stinker of a Saturday, but to come back, he was 10 seconds off Sergio Perez at the end, wasn't he? Booted on some hards, ran out of laps in the end, got it down to 2.5 seconds to Sergio Perez. Had he closed, would he have made the pass? I mean, the tyre difference was only about 4 or 5 laps. They kind of just ran out of laps a bit in the end, didn't they? Because Perez pitted fairly late on as well for the mediums. But probably the best of a bad Saturday again. But he'll be disappointed. He's been beaten by Sergio Perez, who started behind him, but he was looking quick up until that disappointing Saturday qualifying session where he got knocked out. Had he qualified higher up, I'm sure he would have been in the mix for a podium like Lewis. A 7 out of 10 for me. Next up, Yuki Tsunoda, P9 finish. I think this was a really good job from him, didn't he? He got a poor start, dropped 2 places, what down to about 12th when I saw him early on. But from there onward, he did a mega job. 30 lap stint on the mediums. I think he was one of the only ones. Did he do it? I'm sure he did a one-stop strategy. Went on the hards. Fantastic job. Bought him some good points. Held off Lance Stroll fairly comfortably, I'd say, in the end. Beats his teammate, and he's on fire again, isn't he? Again, a couple of back-to-back race weekends where he picks up some points, much needed points for Racing Bulls, and Yuki's the man to pick them up again. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10 because I thought that was a really solid, decent drive from him. The 10th place finish for Lance Stroll. I think overall it'd be disappointing for Aston Martin. He'll be glad he picked up some points. Was on 8 laps fresher tyres than his teammate, who was in 10th at the time. Passed him at the end to take home that 1 point. Couldn't get close enough to Yuki to nick P9, but where they qualified so well, Aston Martin didn't go well in the race at all, did they? So upgrades came, good for 1 lap pace, but they need to work on that for the long race stints, and they've a little bit disappointing. Fernando Alonso was really disappointed with his race. Lance Stroll, though, we can be happy with a point. I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10 to pick up some points in the end, but overall it was disappointing from where they started. 11th place, Fernando Alonso, and yeah, he had a poor race. The best part of his race was when he passed Carlos Sainz at the start, wasn't it? And then from there on he dropped way back. Was holding 10th place. I think he left his teammate past to try and catch Yuki for an extra point for the team, but it wasn't to be. He just didn't sound very happy, and Alonso, like over the radio, like we've seen early doors, like he was at Aston Martin, really happy where he is. I think he's got a bit demoralised with the car and the team upgrades that they're bringing. They just don't seem to work ever, really, do they? So he's getting older. He knows time's not on his side, and he really needs to be like looking at McLaren where he was, looking at them, you think scratching his head. He's moved from McLaren, they've gone on to win, come to Aston Martin, started off really well a couple of seasons ago, and now they're dropping back. So yeah, it's just not a good race from him. A 4 out of 10. 12th place man, Daniel Ricciardo, and he had a good qualifying session in P9. Poor start, was down to P12 early doors, and then from there on he just didn't have a good race at all, did he? He was 20 seconds off Fernando Alonso, 1 lap down after a really good qualifying session. He'll be disappointed. He's been beaten by his teammate who is lined up alongside. Yeah, needs to do better. 4 out of 10 for me. Nico Hülkenberg, 13th place finish for him. Started in 11th, and I thought he'd be fighting for points, and he had a really strange strategy, didn't they? Pitted after 2 or 3 laps, went for the hards, and yeah, I'm not sure, that just absolutely didn't work at all, did it? They didn't leave anything in terms of having an advantage or a deg on the rest of the guys in terms of tyre degs, to make that to their advantage by doing sort of an earlier stop. Strange decision. The car was slow in the race, wasn't it? Both him and his teammate didn't do well at all. A horrible 5 out of 10. It was just, yeah, weren't anywhere, were they? 14th place, Alex Albon, and he had a cracking start up into P9, but that was as good as it got, really. It was a bad choice, the strategy to start on the softs. That really didn't help his race weekend, and then from there on it was slipping backwards, and then had to just really stretch out his stints as long as he could, and was never really on the optimum tyre or tyre that was fresher than the guys ahead of him to really attack them for some points. So I'll be disappointed with that, because the strategies really just set him up for a really difficult race in the end. Another one, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Kevin Magnussen, another one, started on the softs, and he had a really nice move around the outside of Daniel Ricciardo, and that was probably the highlight of his race. From there onwards he just really struggled, finished in 15th, started there. The car just was nowhere where it normally is it? That Haas has been good for the last couple of races, but it just wasn't good in race conditions here. Didn't suit the tight twisty track at all, and the hot weather conditions didn't help them on their tyres. Another 5 out of 10 for me. A 16th place finish for Valtteri Bottas, and he had a really good qualifying session up in P12, and that was the highlight, really. He was doing well in P9, held back George Russell and Sergio Perez at one point, but that car was never looking like it was going to be on for some points. From there onwards it just went horribly wrong. Was running P18, was behind Logan Sargent, about 12 seconds back actually, with 58 laps to go, but 12 laps fresher tyres. Did the job, made the pass on him, and probably that's the best he could do. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 because I think his qualifying was really the highlight. I think he did a really good job in that car. 17th place finish for Logan Sargent. Started 14th alongside his teammate, and he was dropped 5 places at the start, and that's just going to make it really difficult from there onwards. He was poor. A difficult race once you've done that. I'm going to give him a 3 out of 10. P18 finish for Ocon, and he had a disappointing race overall. He managed to get the undercut early on Logan Sargent, but then got stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo in P18. Managed to work himself way up into P16 at one point, but from there dropped backwards. A horrible weekend for Alpine, a horrible weekend for Ocon. A 4 out of 10 for me. Zhou Guanyu, 19th place finish for him, where he had a really good qualifying last season, didn't he? He was just nowhere this weekend. yeah, last by lap 14, and then in the end, lap 56 the last time I seen, he was like nearly 20 seconds behind Valtteri Bottas. A 1 out of 10, a really poor weekend for Zhou Guanyu. His seat really has to be up, hasn't it? I'm sure there'll be someone else taking that seat soon. And last but not least, Pierre Gasly DNF'd in the end, lap 36-37 with a hydraulic issue. Pit lane start for him. He took some new power units to take the penalty here. Made absolute sense. They were at the back anyway. Did a really long first in lap 30, pitted on the hards for some fresh mediums. Came out P15, and I thought that was actually really good from a pit lane start. From there on though, he didn't really get to make the most of the mediums from there. Disappointing overall weekend. No rating for Pierre Gasly. DNF lap 36-37. And let's get to the predictions review, or let's not, because I've had an absolute stinker. The only good thing I can say is that I thought Oscar Piastri would have a good race coming up in P3, but yeah, let's get straight to it. Pole position, I thought Lewis will take pole, Verstappen second and Norris third. It was a McLaren 1, 2 and Verstappen 3, wasn't it? And in the race, I thought it would be a Hamilton, Verstappen, Piastri actually, who thought would take third. I thought he would have a good race. He took the win, fantastic. Lando Norris in second and Lewis Hamilton in third. So yeah, I did think 2 of the 3 drivers would have good races that I predicted for the front. Didn't get the order right at all. I thought it'd be a good weekend for the Alpine. It was an absolute stinker. I thought Ferrari would have a bad weekend, and actually I thought they had probably one of their better weekends that we've seen for some time. 4th and 6th solid pace finishes for them. But yeah, hopefully I get it better next time out. It was not good. Spa next. It should be absolutely fantastic. A circuit that I absolutely love. Eau Rouge, the racing, the change in elements. We always get mixed conditions, or there's some element going on in the race. Safety car, what's really 60% chance there. We get always some action, and we've had some cracking racing so far. It's been so close. You just don't know who's going to be where. And will McLaren continue their run? Last time out in Spa they weren't great. Well, probably wasn't one of their better races. Everyone tipping Mercedes to do well here in Spa. Who knows? I've got it absolutely disastrously wrong for predictions, so I won't count what I say, but it's been a really good weekend overall. A new race winner in Oscar Piastri. It's been brilliant. It's OP81 for number 1 for the race. Fantastic. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment as always. And check out the new sauce, guys. Raju sauces, link in description. You get 10% off when you buy 3 or more sauces, or you pay £10 or spend £12 or more. You'll get 10% off. Use the code F1Guy. If you don't use the link for the website, the code should automatically be applied once you get to checkout. See you next time.